Yeah,
it's very, very
Cool. As long as you need, yeah, it doesn't matter. So, what's going on, guys? I think I know, I've seen most of you guys here before, but welcome back to the JBoss. We've been on kind of a hiatus while we built out this training room. So, excited tonight to have the AppD team here. AppDynamics team is here. Most of the, I think the sales and the engineering team of Atlanta is represented. I'm Eric Wallen, one of the co-founders of Shadowsoft, and we run the JBoss here. Usually try to do it monthly, but tonight we're going to be talking about AppD on OpenShift. So, got folks from my team, Derek Sutherland, who's our middleware cloud SA. And I'll turn it over to Mike Oakland.
Okay, thanks. Appreciate it. Just kind of get started. You guys heard of AppDynamics? A little bit. Okay. Does anybody use any kind of monitoring today? Similar. Okay. What kind of roles are we looking at? Development, operations. So I kind of know where to focus a little bit.
Show of hands, maybe?
Yeah, there's what kind of role?
Developers in the room. Developers. Sysadmins in the room.
Okay. Mostly developers. Okay, cool. So we'll kind of focus on that. There's a lot of different places that we can go with the product. You guys, sounds like you know a little bit about AppDynamics at least. So it's application performance management type solutions, application infrastructure. We can identify some of those kinds of things and do some analytics on data. We're going some of those directions as we kind of go forward with things. So the company's been around now, started selling in 2010, growing very, very quickly. So it's basically what we like to talk about as really the third generation of APM as far as where it came from you know the late probably 90s as far as bytecode instrumentation with that Java container, right? So what I'll do is go just real quick through some of the different things that we kind of talk about in terms of the trends that we're seeing a little bit. Just real quick, what companies we have represented?
With Earthlink.
Earthlink, okay. Which one?
Sentiment 360.
Okay. What do you guys do?
It's analytics, text analytics, social media monitoring, listening, and natural language processing, extraction of key topics.
Okay, cool. Yourself?
Geo.
What's that?
Geo.
Okay, yeah, gotcha. And then we talk to you guys, yeah. Yeah, sweet. Okay, so in terms of who we work with everybody. I mean, if it's in a Java container, it's in JBoss, we work with it. There are a lot of times people will ask, you know, say, oh, we're running this application, that application. It's like, doesn't matter. We just, you know, work with it with any Java container. And we'll talk a little more about the architecture. So yeah, whether it's a travel app running in, you know, on your browser, whether it's a banking application, you know, mobile type applications, or using various handheld devices to do retail shopping and e-commerce. What we actually have seen over, when we talked about the third generation of APM, really gets to the fact that what you used to have with the first couple of generations really focused on were applications that were really web app and database, right? So back in the early 2000s, you know, late 90s, that kind of stuff, where you could get away with that. It was you know, your big WebLogic, you know, servers, typically WebSphere, and that's really how it ran. But now you've got all sorts of things going, right? Very, very distributed. Complexity is going nuts. Do you guys have some fairly complex applications you work with? Okay, yeah. So this is not too unlike what we see a lot of times, right? So you've got all sorts of things happening from web, mobile devices, a lot of SOA applications as far as transmission, a lot of big data going on, NoSQL databases popping up, all sorts of, you know, you can't just, so if you guys just have JBoss, you run other stuff too within the company.
We run Glassfish, Tomcat, and Fuse service mix.
Right, okay. So that's very typical, right? As far as you're gonna have, big companies especially are gonna have all sorts of different things. So we work with all of those. So AppDynamics as a whole, we work with Java applications. So any of the ones you just mentioned, they're .NET, and PHP, Node.js, Python's coming out, and C++ as we get going into things, right? So as we start looking at these things, what we're really wanting to find out with all this complexity is when you have issues that pop up, right? And you have a customer that calls in, you have a red blinky light that goes off, and you end up with a bunch of people in a war room trying to figure out where it is. Did you guys get stuck in those situations ever? Right, trying to help figure out what problems are, and you've got maybe somebody's got a product here that they're trying to figure out. You know, so, oh, my network is fine. Oh, the app server is good to go. My database is good. All those kinds of things. So that's one of the things that we have seen, you know, for years now, is the fact that people try to monitor with their individual stovepipe type solutions like that. But what we're really doing is allowing you to kind of look at the business transactions, which to us, that means what are those things that people are doing with your applications? You know, or you use, you know, on a daily basis. You go and search for a flight. You're going to actually, you know, go to the main site. You're going to search. You're going to actually whittle down your choices, look at details, all those things. And those are the things that we see as a business transaction. And they actually, you know, go through all these different hops. And that's what we care about. And that's what we figured out how to put those all together, right? So something like this, an insurance quote. This actually may be one of my customers at the perimeter that we work with. But yeah, fairly complex. And I've seen situations where you take maybe half of this, and that's a single transaction. Whereas this could be an entire app, right, that we actually see. So we're going to look at, you know, the entire application, a tier, what is the functionality of that tier, an e-commerce tier, what processing, fulfillment, whatever it is, and be able to break those all down, right? And this is kind of what we're talking about. Is instead of having this siloed approach where you're looking at just one of these, maybe some server metrics or OS metrics, database, all those kinds of things, you know, let me see everything that a user does, you know, from the time they log in through, you know, checking out, you know, finding out what's in their cart, all those kind of good things. So mean time to innocence, you know. So we talk about that MTTR, you hear, you know, a lot of different acronyms for it. But that is one of the things that, you know, saying everybody looks at their own little tool and says, you know, not me, right? So this is something that actually allows everybody to work, you know, much better together. We've got Citrix is an example. I kind of show, you know, their controller, which is where their data is kept, right? They actually have, for the GoToMeeting site, right? You can look, and they've got, I think it's 7 or 8 under environments, you know, has AppDynamics, and then production. So they use us for everything, and that's really, you know, when you start talking about, you know, using it to the entire life cycle of the product, it's called DevOps, right? When they bring you guys in on the development side, you can actually have the same product that the operations guys are using, you know, kind of start looking at things and actually point to things and identify that, hey, the problem's actually right here. And that's where we, you know, the big value is, I think, for the product is being able to take away all the people that are in this war room meeting. I was working with a company right off perimeter here, and we're trying to do kind of a presentation for these guys with their data, and nobody could make it. And I was like, what's going on? Well, they had 80 people, 80 people in the war room call for 8 hours. So you add up the dollars on that. It's pretty significant. You start getting into it, right? Very expensive. So what are the things that kind of make us different, and why do people use AppDynamics, right? So unlike a lot of these legacy type APM products that, yeah, there's tons of them out there, and your biggest, you know, 2-3 letter acronym companies, you know, that have, you know, APM type products, monitoring products, and it's very difficult to run in production, right, and get a lot of value out of it, because they're mostly developed as profilers, developed for development tests maybe, but when you start putting in production, you can only monitor a small segment of your application before it starts taking your system down, right? And there's a lot of cases where people will say, okay, well, it's justified because we can't find the problem anywhere. We got to jack it up, and we just, you know, went from 30% overhead, you know, on the CPU up to about 60%, but we've got the data. So looking at that, as far as the way our co-founders kind of came about AppDynamics, is they came from those environments, right, with those companies. They said, you know, let's try to do things differently, right? So that they designed AppDynamics for production, right, and to be very, very low overhead in production. Show me 100% of all of the business transactions that go through, whether it's QA, test, dev, production, you know, very, very limited overhead. Okay, so you can see absolutely everything, all transactions, and build the intelligence into the product. That's another kind of fault of, you know, monitoring tools over the years, is they just spit out, you know, millions of metrics at you, and you gotta try to figure out, what am I looking at? Where's the problem at? It's like, I don't know, there's a bunch of gobbledygook up there. So build in the intelligence into the product. You know, no real need for manual configuration. Maybe where it figures things out on its own. Right? So that's like, okay, cool, we got that. We can run in production, and then again with the intelligence is doing the self-learning auto baselining. Right? So when I put this product in, you know, allow it to actually start monitoring and understand every metric that we see, what is normal for it. So if I look at between 7 and 8 p.m. on a Thursday night for the last 12 Thursdays, what is normal for the application, for this tier, this node, this one business transaction? What does the checkout process look at like on Thursdays at 7 p.m. versus noon, versus 1 a.m. versus Tuesday, whatever, right? So it has the ability to do those kinds of things. So in terms of how it works, what it does a little bit, as far as architecturally, I was saying it's the controller, it's is the brains behind it, right? That's where all the data goes. And mostly what we're going to talk about is the application agent, which is where JBoss lives, right? So we have the other things that actually it does, and we'll take a peek at, is the end user component, which actually can show you from the browser level or the mobile device, what is the experience for the end user, right? Because if we're not really looking at what's going on for the end user, we're kind of missing the boat. Right? If we just look and say, hey, my container is at 30% CPU and memory, the heap is at 75%. So that's awesome, but what's happening? Maybe it's at 85%, 90%. Is it affecting the user? So we need to know what's going on with them, right, from that level. The machine agent, this is really pretty cool because this allows us to not just get you OS type metrics, but it gives you the ability to bring in data from all sorts of other things, right? So if you're working with something that, another tier that we don't have an agent for, we can really pretty easily bring in data from that outside tier. Maybe it's an LDAP server, or maybe it's a load balancer or something else, either through just an API or maybe some logs, right? Something like that. Okay. And then on the database side, most of your big relational databases, you talk about SQL Server, Oracle, MySQL, all the way through some of the NoSQL databases now. MongoDB, Cassandra is coming up for us, and some of those we can actually get down to the individual piece of SQL and how it's actually explained within the databases and that stuff, right? So that's a little bit on what AppDynamics is. Now we're going to shift a little bit and talk about how do we work, the Red Hat connection, why we're working a lot with Shadowsoft, the guys here now. So not too terribly long ago, we started working with OpenShift in a number of different areas as far as how do we work together, right? I think that seeing us as a growing...
Just before you go into that, right? Yeah. How many people in here actually know what OpenShift is?
Yeah, I was about to ask.
Okay.
Yeah, everybody? We have a good understanding about the chip, yes?
No, we
Oh, you guys are going to ask about the chip. Okay, great. So, do you want me to, or?
Yeah, go ahead. You're the expert.
So, yeah, how many of you guys are familiar with what a platform as a service is?
PaaS environment.
Anybody? Yeah, a couple people? Okay, so what OpenShift essentially is a platform as a service. But what that means is it allows for environments, the platform layer. In other words, getting above the operating system, moving towards your platform, whether that's PHP, JBoss, whatever, giving it the ability to be readily deployed quickly and be elastically scalable. In other words, scaling vertically and horizontally to meet your customer demands when you have to, right? So that being said, how many guys know or have used Docker in the past? You guys used Docker before? So OpenShift originally was built on the idea of containers before Docker became a thing, which is what everyone knows what Docker is, container-based, right? So when we're talking about OpenShift frequently, there's three major concepts that are built into it. Gears, okay, cartridges, and nodes. Nodes, for all intents and purposes, are where your containers, your pseudo containers, are going to live, and that's typically Red Hat Enterprise Linux-based operating system. Whether that's in a VM or somewhere physical, doesn't really matter. Your node is just the operating system, wherever it's living, right? Above that lives your gears, and that's considered Red Hat's version of a container. It's grouped in kind of a similar way using CNAMEs and namespaces, so you can control performance and things like that, right? But they also wrap it around with SE Linux, so they can control security group access between different containers that they have, okay? Now, like how when you're using Dockers, one service is meant for one container, okay? So in this case, one service is meant per gear. You can drop a JBoss instance into a gear, and that would be your main instance of a Docker container, theoretically speaking. In version 3 of OpenShift, which comes out later this year, Docker is actually going to be the baseline container system for OpenShift. And again, this is more of a framework and a tooling system. So rather than having to go onto your box and create a Docker container or create an OpenShift gear by hand, you log into either a web framework or use their framework tools to spin up multiple instances of JBoss, PHP, Node.js, a MySQL database, whatever. It'll spin it up for you. It'll automatically set up username and passwords for it. If you want a database associated with your JBoss container, it'll do that for you. And it'll elastically scale again to meet your customer demands whenever you have it. So the big takeaway from all this is, rather than having to spin up a VM and do everything by hand, it's pretty much a one-click turnkey solution for building out your entire operating environment. Does that make sense? Everybody good?
Well, so I have a question about that.
Yeah.
When they move to version 3,
Yes.
will we be able to take a Docker image that we create and pop it into OpenShift?
Yes. OpenShift v3 is completely built on top of Docker and Kubernetes. So for those of you who are familiar with Kubernetes, it's Google's orchestration engine for Docker. It allows Docker containers to be managed much like how Docker Hub currently manages them today. But it also allows you to be able to monitor performance between your containers. It allows you to elastically scale them just like how you can in OpenShift. And it does some other things around orchestration. How many of you guys are familiar with CI tools, like Jenkins? Does anybody use Jenkins in the room? Yes? Okay, so currently today, when you spin up a new gear instance inside of OpenShift, a Jenkins instance is built up in the background that you don't see, and it gives you a Git repository to interact with your gear. So when you want to push code to it, you push code to the Git repository associated with your gear. The hidden Jenkins instance notices that build getting pushed, rebuilds your code base, and as long as everything gets built correctly, it pushes it into your gear. With the new version with Docker, the same thing is going to occur, but Kubernetes is going to be doing most of that. There will be some Jenkins interplay that goes on with it, but Kubernetes does a lot of that orchestration for the build process as well. Does that make sense? Good?
Yeah. Oh, what if we have something already running on OpenShift? Is Red Hat going to take care of that for us? And
they haven't disclosed what they're going to do for that. Now, what Red Hat has done in the past with products like JBoss, they have a support contract that goes on for a certain number of years post the completion.
Okay.
And what they might tell customers is you're pretty much stuck on version 2, and all you get is the updates until it hits end of life. But they haven't really come out and said whether they're going to do that or they're going to support them. What I can tell you is this. In version 3 right now, on the specs that I've read from the beta forums, there is no such thing as gears or cartridges anymore, which are, again, the main version of containers inside of OpenShift v2. And if those terms don't exist anymore, I don't know how they would support them. There might be a conversion set up.
Migration path.
Yeah, a migration path from migrating from one to the other. But for anyone who's used Docker, it's very easy to move an application into a Docker container, so as long as it's not built on legacy components. Right. So,
Yeah.
everybody good? Any questions?
Cool.
Just learn something.
Yeah. Yeah, good stuff. Yeah. Okay. So, as we just saw there, and this is super simple. As far as working with OpenShift, I haven't gotten that deep into it myself as of yet. All you got to do is go in, create an ID in OpenShift, you can start developing or adding your applications immediately. They were saying, drop in JBoss, whatever it may be, as far as what you're looking to do with it. You've got an application up and running, and then as you saw, you've got the cartridge for AppDynamics. So this is our community site, where I was talking about a minute ago in terms of our machine agent, where you can actually bring in other types of data. This is where the cartridge sits as well, as far as telling you exactly what it is. You actually have the Red Hat client you would have here, and what you're really going to do with it is exercise these commands that show it where's our controller live, where all the data is going to go, right? So this is kind of telling it for that agent, that JBoss instance, where are we sending the data? What is the application name? What is the tier? Or what kind of functionality is it? And then what is the node that you want to populate it with?
Just
right?
real quick before we move on, just to show you guys this. Can you go back to the first tab you have open?
Yeah.
Thank you. So just so you guys know, there is 2 different versions of OpenShift, technically 3. There's OpenShift Origin, which is the community version. There's OpenShift Enterprise, which is on-premise, you install inside of your own environment. And there's OpenShift Online, which is a online portal that you can use. It's hosted on technically on Amazon Web Services. But the point of this is, if you guys ever want to try it out and see what it's like, you can go to OpenShift.online.org or .com, I'm sorry, and you can create a user account and spin up to 3 tiers up for free. So you can run a MyPHP instance, you can run a JBoss instance for free. But when you log in, just like he was saying, you'll get this applications page, and once you're there, you can just say, oh, I want a Jenkins instance up and running. You just click on it, and it'll deploy it. And that's all there is to it. So if you don't mind for just a second, can you open up that JBoss application server one real quick, just to show them what it looks like? Yeah. So once you get in here, you can set up your own domain that's off of rhcloud.com, and then you put in a namespace for every app that you install. And as soon as you decide on this, you can scroll to the bottom and just hit create, and it builds you whatever it is you tell it to build.
Yeah.
So super fast for deploying stuff.
Very simple.
The cool thing about this is when you hit deploy, it automatically puts it online, so it's front-facing the internet, and it has its own SSL server lined up with it. And they have a control interface, so if you want to say buy a GoDaddy domain and point it at OpenShift, there's a path to do that in about 5 minutes. So it's very good.
Very nice.
Continue. I'm sorry.
Yeah. So yeah, here's where you actually would go to get the information, right? And then you would actually run the command that would grab the information out of Git, right? So here's all your binaries that actually would run in terms of that. As we go back here, you'll actually see this is the command that you would actually run, goes out to GitHub and actually pulls down that cartridge, right? And then gives it the information that we were identifying before.
So when you run that command, are you using the RHC tool?
Yeah, exactly.
Uh,
So you're on that node on OpenShift.
Yes.
Okay.
So technically, RHC is just part of your packages you can download for any Red Hat instance.
Okay.
So it can be Fedora-based, CentOS-based, or Red Hat. And once it's installed, it doesn't actually have to be a part of OpenShift. You download the plugin, and you configure it to point at an OpenShift broker. And that OpenShift broker can be OpenShift Online, it can be OpenShift Anywhere, and then you can manage it via that command line tool from your local machine. So what this technically does is when he calls RHC add cartridge, it's calling an SSH command that calls to the broker and says create this. And when it's done creating it, it then creates an SSH key link so you can SSH into that cartridge.
Could he added that cartridge from the OpenShift GUI?
He could, as long as it was available in the GUI list.
Is it?
If it's not available in the GUI list, this is AppDynamics, so I'm guessing it's not. But if you have OpenShift Enterprise and it's installed in your environment, or OpenShift Origin, you can put anything you want in that list. That's just a predefined list that you can alter and add all you want to.
Okay. So basically, once you do this, that allows us to get instrumented. So really what that's going to do is it's going to look at the startup script for JBoss, and what we're going to do is add our -Java agent to it, and takes our code, puts it on the box, essentially, modifies one XML file to give it that information. That is, what is the name of the application, the tier, that good stuff. And then within the startup script, it says, go and get the jar out of our directory, and that's what we're going to use to actually start monitoring the bytecode as the classes all get deployed and application comes up. And at that point, we'll actually start seeing all the business transactions that come through the system. All right? That make sense?
So where is your broker going to live in this example?
The broker?
I mean, the one that's receiving, the controller receiving all of the data
Right.
from that client?
So within this, in this case, what we're looking at, this is one of our demo instances, but typically the controller that we have that gets all the information from the agents, it can be either on-premise or in our SaaS controllers, right? In our cloud, essentially.
Could that controller be run on OpenShift as well?
Yeah, I'm not sure on that. I mean, we have technical specs, but
So I'll say this if you'd like.
yeah.
It's not, you guys don't have the cartridge out for it yet, but you could make it into a cartridge. At the end of the day, it's just Linux. And the instance that they have is technically a jet, no, it's not Jetty, it's
Glassfish, yeah.
It's a Glassfish server
Yeah.
that has the packages pre-installed in it. There's a couple other things like for the Geo server, there's a separate setup for it.
Right, and
But
MySQL's in the back
You
end.
could just install that stuff into a custom
You
cartridge.
could do the DIY thing.
Yep. Or you
Yeah.
could go and get, wait for version 3 to come out and put it in a Docker container,
Right.
which you guys are gonna be
Yeah.
probably patching. And
I got it.
So, yeah, we already have
And
one of
then
those, yeah. So, yeah.
So yes.
Yeah. Yeah, thinking about it that way, it's like, yeah, it's like, we do have, some test environments that we work with that are in Docker today. So, yeah, you could, I don't know, depending on scalability wise. So what's unique about the controller as well is anybody that's worked with APM solutions in the past knows that when you get to big production, you're talking about typically having to have multiple controllers out there to take the information in. What we have is extremely scalable. So we've had upwards to 12, 13, 14,000 JVMs reporting back to a single controller. Right? In that case, you're talking about either one of our standalone boxes in our SaaS environment or a pretty big honking box that you would have on-prem. Okay, so that's where that would kind of go. Okay, so I've got a couple demo instances. So what I'm going to do is walk you guys through what AppDynamics looks like, how we can use it, how it may make your life a little easier in terms of that. So, like when I was going through it there, the end user experience. Let's talk about that real quick as far as kind of an end-to-end flow as far as what we would actually see when we're collecting all this data, right? So what you're actually identifying here is folks that are actually using your applications either with a web browser, right, or a mobile device as far as native iOS or Android devices out in the world. And you can actually see what is the request response time for any of those, network errors, HTTP errors, a few of those different types of things. And then you can actually get into maybe just looking at an individual web-based, your web-based users and identify where people are coming in from, hover over these and see a lot of different bits of information. So all of the information we get here is basically coming out of the navigation timing API, which is part of all the modern browsers that are out there, right? So you can look at it from this angle. You can right-click and say, you know what, show me the snapshots from Oregon. And what the snapshots are the individual runs from these end users that are from Oregon, okay? Actually, let me realize, time-wise, you can actually then identify, what are maybe some of the slowest end user requests, just kind of picking and choosing what you want to look at here. The purple, and this kind of goes throughout the product, you have stalled transactions. Identify what normal is for every metric that we have. So for this one individual request, the fetch catalog, we know what normal is. So when we see something that's running in 40 seconds, like, okay, that's pretty well abnormal. We can look at, these tell me a couple different things as far as I've got resource timings, which is another API within the browsers. And this tells me that I have a call graph, right, for this checkout, web request. So if I click on that, I'm going to then see exactly how it was seen on the browser, right? As far as what is the end user experience time. So when they hit click on checkout, how long did it take before it actually came up in the browser? And that's broken down into a lot of different metrics that you see as far as, when was the DOM ready to start rendering it, right? What is the first byte time, server connection time? And then I look at all these timings, and what really stands out is I've got 9 seconds in the back end, server latency. So from the standpoint of the browser, I can actually tell right away if this user is having a problem on my desktop for the most part. As far as if I saw a lot of DOM ready time, HTML download, whatever it may be over here, would tell me I may have more problems on the desktop. I can see if it's something that is more internet latency, or if it's in the back end, from what we see here, right? There's a lot of different things we can get into with this, but what I want to be able to do is identify that, all right, I see this, and how we identify where they're coming from Oregon, is based on this IP address. We can see that they're on Chrome 32 on a Windows box, okay? Moreover, what I want to know now is, okay, it's on the back end. What is it they were doing on the back end? Where was the latency at? So when I click on that link, what you can see here is we just went from the snapshot on the browser side to the snapshot on the application side. Okay, so these, what I'm looking at here, these would be my 3 instances of JBoss that I've got, right? So I've got an e-commerce tier, an order processing tier, and an inventory server tier. And what this is meant to do with the colors that I'm seeing is really kind of take your eye to where the problem may be, right? So typically you look at something like this, and I look at this is my order processing tier that I have here. I'm like, okay, great, it's running fine. So everybody can buy whatever it is that they're doing on this e-commerce site. They come in, they drop an order on the queue, and this guy picks it up, processes it through Oracle, all's good. Well, the only problem is when they go to say, hey, is that product actually in inventory, they're having an issue right here. And I can just kind of look at this and say, well, look, all that 9 seconds is in this MySQL query that I have back here. So I can start here if I wanted to and drill down. So this is going right into the container, right into JBoss, and saying, show me how did this transaction execute down at the code level. So you see that within just a couple clicks, I'm right down at the code level. It's giving us the line number for the code. And I can see here that, oh, it looks like this web service is where all 9 seconds went. I select that. But what I understand now is that, okay, I can see this. It's going from the e-commerce tier to the inventory tier. The downstream call is 9 seconds. The time that we want to be able to identify isn't even on that tier. So I want to drill down to that downstream call. So what we're doing is actually going from JVM to JVM, at the code level, and tracking and following that, right? And we're doing that from this one GUI. That's what we inject into the HTTP header for a transaction. Maybe it's JMS, or we're putting it into the JMS code, or any one of the different types of web services, JMI or whatever it may be that you want to be able to track information for. And now we can see, okay, here is where we have our JDBC call. That's 8.6, 8.7 of the 9 seconds. Select that. And it's waiting on to get a connection from the database. Right? If I want to or need to, I can say, show me in the database what's going on. So if this was like a really nasty SQL statement, and I can see that this thing is iterated over it 2,000 times and it's taken 45 seconds, I can drill into the database instance, right? Let me find the node that we're interested in. So what you saw there is I can be looking at all of my database instances, right? And then get down into the one that actually with Oracle, we can get to the point where we follow it from that JDBC call into Oracle and identify that, hey, here's a select statement here, right? That's taking up 97% of all the resources, right? So I can see that it's got 5 hours, 42 seconds of latency or time elapsed in here out of the 5 hours and 52 seconds that we have. So we see all the information and what the various wait states are. And now if I want to see, okay, how is it that Oracle is seeing the execution plan. I can click on our execution plan here. I can see what's going on. This tells me that I've got a lot of wait state in between the actual execution elapsed time and CPU time. A lot of waits occurring. So we can take a lot of time and drill deep into that guy, right? So what we've just done in a couple minutes, once you start to really get to know the tool, is you can go from helping out your production ops guys, or if you identify something, somebody calls it, hey, can you take a look at this? You can go from an end user view into what's going on in the middle tiers. Maybe you see that it's even a remote call out somewhere else. We'll get back into, where are some of the really interesting places that you can go with this. But really quickly, you can go down into the code, follow it through to a database, or any other external call that you may have.
So what did you have to put into the database to get it to report all that information?
Nothing.
Really?
Yeah. Okay. It's a little different technology. So in years past, it's funny because probably 14 years ago, I worked with a company, Precise Software. APM, they started on the database side, right? And back then, it was really expensive to hit like the $V tables and all of the performance tables in all the databases, right? So we used to give people crap that were using outside requests, just SQL going in and making a request to those. Well, over the years, it's gotten a lot less expensive to do that. So what it's doing is really just creating, when we go in and create one of these links, if you will, right? So if I look back at any one of these that may be,
So you're just pulling the database. So.
Yeah.
Okay.
So we look at, what is it? Is it DB2? Is it MySQL, Oracle, whatever? And we tell it, where does it live? Give us a username and a password that can actually go out to it and get us all this data, right? We've got exactly what those permissions are needed to do all those things. And it goes out once a minute, once every 2 minutes, whatever you want, and gets you all the data that you need remotely, so that the DBAs don't get pissed at you for wanting to put some on the database, right? And the other thing here too is, a lot of times the big companies that we work with, Earthlink, or I can name around town, IHG, Coca-Cola, Weather Channel. There's a whole mess of them that we work with here in town now. But most of those big companies, their DBAs already have tools that they like to use, right? So what this is really, the guys that really embrace this part of it are the operations guys that say, you know what, I can see that the problem is back there, but they won't let me play with their tools, right? I don't have any access to those. So what this does is allow them to collaborate a lot better with the DBAs and say, hey, you know what, I just saw that there's a problem back here. It's this SQL statement. This is the wait state, and I can see that it needs an index rebuild. Boom. So you're not necessarily telling them how to do their job, but kind of hard. So backing up to what we kind of refer to as the core of the product, right? This is where kind of the rubber meets the road. This is where we started from, is the app server, right? And identifying what's going on inside of JBoss, inside of Java. And what we do here that's so unique is being able to identify, when I look at this guy and when I figure out, this is not, okay. Oops. All right. What this is telling us is that when the inside of this guy's green, it turns colors when it's not performing well. And what I'm doing is comparing it against the baseline. In this case, a 30-day baseline. It could be a 3-month baseline, let's say, last 12 weeks, like I was saying before, between 7 and 8 p.m. on a Thursday, right? It could be just between 7 and 8 p.m. for the last 2 weeks, just generally, right? But when we start going outside of the norm for load, response time, or errors, this is going to turn colors, right? A little bit like we see here, right? We've got, this is yellow. So this is telling us more about the node health, CPU, memory, those kinds of things, right? So what we're doing that allows us to run a production all the time is more or less talk about the normality of what's going on for the entire application, this tier, these 2 nodes, the business transaction. What we do is we're going to look at the load as far as every transaction that comes in. We're going to count them, measure them, and then put them in the scorecard. So when things come in that are normal, I see here I've got almost 11,000 transactions. Now, when you have a problem, do you want to look at all the normal transactions, the deepest level, or do you want the problematic transactions? It's kind of a no-brainer, right? So that's really what the product's built upon, is being able to say, all right, well, yeah, these are the guys that are running slowly. So show me the representative samples of these, and let me get right down to the root cause that I see here, kind of where we were before, right? And I can see this is red. I can drill down into that, into this guy. So within about 3 clicks, I'm right back down to my root cause, this insert, right? Or maybe it's a piece of code. And if I wanted to just say, you know what, just show me the hotspots. What are the longest running classes and methods? I can see those. Show me just the SQL calls. And I see that, okay, this guy's in red because that's the longest running. We can see HTTP parameters, cookies, user data. Now this gets really interesting when you start talking about benefits for the business, right? So user data being, what are the parameters on those classes that are going through, the method parameters? So what if it's, you're talking about customer information in terms of what are they doing? And e-commerce is probably the easiest one, right? So what products are they putting in their cart? What are they? What is the average product size? What is the how much per hour are we actually getting in revenue? Those kinds of things. That's the stuff that you can actually pull out of the parameters within JBoss, right? Doing that kind of stuff. So that's pretty cool. And then you get right into within this time period, show me my CPU, memory, and disk I/O, right? Your heap. So show me everything. This is a pretty good looking sawtooth pattern, right? It's going to show you little trash cans when you have your major garbage collections. And then it'll show you, as you go down, what is the amount of time we're spending on our minor major collections. And then all your other memory pools are going to be down here as well. You guys ever run into issues with memory leaks? Sure. Everybody kind of does at one point or another. So what we can do is when we identify through looking at this that we're actually collecting memory, but it keeps going up to the right, upper right. You identify that, you can turn on our automatic leak detection, and that's going to allow you to say, go and find for me automatically what are those classes and methods that could be at risk for leaking, right? And to go with that, our object instance tracking is going to do the same thing. How many instantiations of a specific class do we have? I was doing a proof of concept for somebody a few weeks ago, and they were like, oh, we're having a major problem right now, and they turned that on after about 2 minutes. They're like, oh my God, we've got 3 million instantiations of this one class over 2 minutes. It was a mess. So it's like, okay, they shut it all down and figured out what the problem is. So pretty simple in terms of that.
I have a question on the, so do you have to make a category of what the order or the transaction looks like?
No, not necessarily. So what it's going to do is when the intelligence, I guess, that's built into the product here, right? So if I look at, let's see, 6 hours. What we really are curious about here is the type. So these are all struts in web services. Okay? There's going to be a number of different types of Java requests that we see come in, right? So there may be servlets, struts, web services, JMS. It depends on where the transaction starts. The first place or tier that we see it, we actually name it at that point. So as you see here, you may see something that is view items, get all items. And it's like, well, that's cool, and you guys may understand what that is, right? What happens when you're trying to talk to the business or maybe the operations guys? They're like, well, you guys know what that is, but well, what is it, right? Oh, that's the fetch catalog. Okay, great, right? So what it allows you to do is simply select here and rename the business transaction as we see it come in, right? So now you're talking, or you can talk more in business terms with the business side of the house or anybody else that may care about it. right? So there's a number of other things that we can kind of look at and do within the product, especially when it comes to if you're running, new bits of code, if you will, and you want to say, all right, let me compare two different time periods, right? So maybe I want to do something as far as my Java test 1 here versus test 2, and these are all saved time periods. So we can look at these and identify that, all right, well, these look pretty similar, right? They're just two different time periods of the same day. In an individual hour, we had about the same amount of number of transactions. This ran in almost 2 seconds. This was about 1.5 seconds. And then you get all the characteristics about those two runs. So look at that in terms of what you guys may do today, what QA may do, different test runs, load test, whatever, maybe, and then production. So load test 1 versus load test 2. What happens when you go to roll out new code? So you just made a modification to some of the major functionality on the site. They roll it into production, and they go, oh, wait a minute, something is definitely off, right? The first 2 hours. How do you very quickly identify that, A, that there is a problem with the new rollout, and then B, very, very quickly identify it so you can remediate, roll back, whatever you need to do, right? So getting to this point is pretty nice, but then you can be able to say, all right, well, which transactions is it that actually had an issue? So you can even do it from, looking at just time-wise. Oh, we just rolled it out and it's running in 10 seconds here versus 7 seconds here. So we actually added 3 seconds to it, or it was running in 10 seconds and we trimmed 3 seconds off of it. Or maybe it was running in a second, now it's running at 200 milliseconds, something like that. So it really depends on how you look at this thing. And you can compare a lot of different areas. Just simply, hey, you know what? Looking again at the baseline of normal, we have slow, very slow in our stalled transactions. So very slow being that, 3 standard deviations from normal. Maybe you want to identify just those things. It's like, okay, we had 51 and 49. Well, what's going on with that last one that we may have had? So if we look at that and say, well, these are the same type of 2 time periods. But you get the idea. If you have 10% errors in one time frame and 0.2% on another, you either really fix the problem or maybe it's backwards, depending on where it is, where you are in the process. So that's a good bit about it. We can look at anything you guys saw you want to drill a little deeper into with that. There's other things that we can do around scalability analysis in terms of what happens, as we increase load to the system versus response time, right? Or CPU utilization versus load. So scalability, capacity planning, it's all good for those kinds of things as well, right? Do you guys think that something like this would be helpful for what you do as far as today? Yeah?
Sure.
So the other thing I'd kind of say too is, some folks, especially on the development side, may look at when we talk about the production aspects of this, and the fact that we're getting the deep code level information on those things that are typically out of bounds, out of norm, if you will. It's like, okay, that's cool, but what happens when you are, more on the development side, like most of the guys here, and you want to see every transaction as far as down to the line of code? That's when we can go to our dev mode, development mode. This is putting it more as a profiler. Now, as soon as I hit the button and say run these 15 transactions, now I've got that deep code introspection for every one of those. Okay, so that when you guys are just even going through test cycles, we license the product by JVM, and typically you have your production, nodes that are being looked at, and then the under environments and development as far as that goes. So you can be running it right on your own workstation with that. Okay. Any questions?
Yeah, Yeah, I think you just answered mine. I was going to ask, what is the licensing? How does that work? 'Cause
Right.
Earthlink does use this product, and I've seen it identify a problem in a production system that I'm not associated with, but I actually saw a web service call, basically stall out. And I thought, hey, that's pretty cool. I mean, I had been to this demo before, so I kind of understood how the product worked. So I can kind of testify that, it'll identify those latent calls. So this other group is using this AppDynamics. So they must be the special group, because my group isn't.
We like to talk to your group.
Right.
Yeah.
So, we're kind of, so you said it's like by the JVM?
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, and there's Hunter back here is more on the sales side. They don't let me talk about money.
Yeah, I have no money, so. I'd
give away for free. I think it's awesome. But yeah, so we work.
What, I thought it was open source.
Yeah, it's not. Yeah. So
what I see at my group is we need the same thing, because we have a lot of distributed transactions.
Right.
All kinds of different servers spread out, all the creation, but we're kind of like doing the homegrown thing, And I'm thinking, well, why is half the company doing this, and why is my group doing something else?
Right.
And that there's no cohesiveness, and
we run into that, a fair amount as far as that goes. As far as we should build it ourselves,
right?
And that gets into how long do you want to maintain something like that? What happens when the developers who are working with that leave, or
because I can guarantee that the only guy who understands it is the guy who wrote that.
Yeah, we see that a lot.
Yeah.
And I know, we've worked together before. So if you guys wanted us to come out and have that conversation with your group, Hunter and my guys, we could do that for sure.
Yeah.
And dance around the political part of it too.
Yeah, exactly.
One of the key things that they almost never talk about with AppDynamics, and I find it surprising, but the biggest thing is it's allowing you as an organization to have the insurance that if someone goes to leave your company, right?
Yeah.
Someone leaves your company in the development team, and they're gone now. They're the only person that maybe knowledge of a certain part of the code base. It doesn't really matter quite as much anymore, because you can go back, create a transaction, and watch how the code steps through it. So you're like, okay, these are the function calls that are important to this transaction. So it makes a huge difference for you.
I have one client that when they onboard new employees, the first place they take them to learn about the architecture and their applications, how they all run, take them straight to AppDynamics and show them. So.
Yeah, it is pretty cool, because a lot of people are like, well, what else do we have to do to get all of this?
Right.
It's like, well, all we do is put the agents on each of these controllers, and it automatically identifies everything that's going on. What's really cool sometimes is, when we typically get started with a customer, it's like, we got to put this into our QA. Typically, we would start, one of the test boxes, and we'll do something like this, and they'll say, wait a minute, that's a production database. Well, it's like we're not doing that. You kind of are. Yeah.
That's why my question. To be quite
You're like, what is that?
Yeah.
And we did finish
the QE or UAT is hitting production.
Yes.
That's a no-no, right?
Yeah, exactly. One of those kind of situations, or we just decommissioned that, or we're supposed to, 5 months ago. And just identify things that they didn't know were there, even some of the top architects. Especially when you start getting really messy kind of diagrams of, it gets interesting. I just got done working with Disney, with all their parks and resorts, and it was the most technically interesting site I've ever worked with. It was, when you look at the tiers, they had about 200 tiers, which are all kind of sub-applications, about 900 nodes. And it was just a big kind of spaghetti mess of stuff.
So were all 900 nodes reporting back to the same
controller?
Yes.
Okay. Oh, yeah.
So that's how it's able to kind of understand.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that is one of those things too, is especially when you have a lot of different sub-applications, because what we're looking at here is this is another application. Right, this is the fulfillment portion of the big e-commerce overall app, right? And then when we go into selecting just that component to it, now it's got its own architecture, how it's linked to it, right? In terms of that, so there's those kinds of things. Let me show you one more thing that
Before you
Hey,
do the
Mike, there's a
question
question back there.
My question goes around practically starting talking with the customer, let's say financial institution that has critical application, and you have to come and set up AppDynamics to show them what they can see in that application. Let's say they have a web-based application with JBoss servers, Oracle databases, storages, a couple of email server, and most of them have a core banking system, right? Most financial institutions have a similar environment. How many days do you think you need to have this environment up and running? And what type of problem do you run into with the network and connection, with the question of security, any certification, or how do you tell this institution that no data leak is going to appear when we install all those agents on their servers?
Right.
What's the experience there?
So yeah, I mean, we're working with a lot of big financial institutions now. I thought probably one of the most compelling things I heard this last year was from JPMorgan Chase. It was something that our CEO, president, kind of told us was he was at a meeting with, it was JPMorgan and they had probably 15 or 20 CIOs of very large institutions. And he said that the CIO of JPMorgan kind of stood up and said, look, I hardly ever endorse a product, a company, anything. They said, what these guys are doing for the bank right now will absolutely change the way we do business. So that was pretty interesting. And then after that, we got awarded one of their technology kind of things.
Yes,
but beyond that, yes.
How do you tell them, what do you use to convince them that there is no data leaked around, that there's no risk of losing data?
Well, yeah, so, yeah, then there's the architecture of it. Let me go back to this real quick.
Is it in the VPN, the way you can guarantee that everything's in a closed network? Where
I mean, basically,
They can host this all in their own.
inside.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it doesn't, we have two models, whether it's SaaS or on-premise. So
So
some
there, yeah.
financial institutions decide they
And now
want to
to
do it
set
all.
up do you have some sort of plan for an on-premise sample or proof of concept that you can come into the company?
No, that's exactly what we do.
They do that.
Provide this machine.
Well, yeah, that's,
Show you the server.
and that's what we're kind of getting towards is with those kind of institutions. So, in the US, it's pretty much your financial, federal, anything that's like HIPAA or like medical type stuff, if you will. They're like, yeah, none of our data can leave our four walls, right? So all of this lives inside the data center, right?
And about taking me to JP Morgan or one of my customer to JP Morgan, does that work to show them what we did here? Is it possible
we
to
can
get a financial institute or another one to show them what you've done there?
I'm sure we could. Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of stuff that we're doing today with, there's a lot of things in Charlotte where we're doing some things up there with the big banks, a number of different things on that side.
Yeah, some of them will do references, but 100, correct me if I'm wrong, I think we have at least 100 referenceable customers that will.
That will answer a lot of
That will
questions.
talk
You
to
can do
them.
a bank or
Yeah.
another bank and let them know what's done.
Is it,
That's how many days. And
yeah, as far as getting it set up,
Even in 4 walls, it takes.
yeah.
It takes
40 hours
Yeah.
typically.
Yeah, if you have
We're talking
box to put this on,
2
yeah.
hours, less hours maybe.
Yeah. How many, it depends almost on how many JVMs you want to put it on, right? If you have access to all these, the biggest problem is usually that.
Well, the one issue I've ever seen come up ever, and they've just fixes for this, but this is the one hurdle, is if the instances are running in Windows. Because attaching it to a Windows service, the JVM parameter, that's the only time I've ever seen a hiccup come up, but there is documentation to fix that now. When you guys first put out documentation for like a year ago though, there was holes in the documentation for Windows, which has now since been updated. But there have been hurdles on Windows 2012 server, I think it was, in the past. So if it's a Linux environment though, and they're running Java, this is gonna take like less than a day to install.
I mean, it's very interesting application. And I have some situation, seriously, application performance management is topic. It's a very serious topic, but it's also complex. It has been very complex in the past.
Right.
And many people didn't do it for the reason you mentioned. Many people design it as profilers, and you don't use the profiler in a productive environment because it eats up your resources, right? So using an application performance tool that can really show that it's not taking away computing resources of the production environment, and that can give an end-to-end view, like you're saying. Because the network, with all the problem we have, opening ports, closing ports, having a server you can put somewhere, and having people to look at it. I don't know if you have some sort of alert that can push over that.
Yeah, sure.
Absolutely, yeah, and the nice thing too
It's a
is
wonderful thing.
these guys are going one way HTTPS to this guy typically, well, especially when it's in our SAS 443, outbound from the data center up here.
You won't have it with many institutions to send you that to your SAS.
No, exactly, but typically,
Locked in there.
so on the alerting side, pretty much whatever you can think of almost in terms of what you would want to do on that side. There's we have a number of different health rules that are really out of the box that you would see here. So things like business transaction response time is much higher than normal, right? So you look at what is 3 standard deviations greater than a baseline of normal.
How do you measure this business transaction? Just by measuring the result of the REST call or the web service call or a Java EJB call?
Yeah, it depends on what it is, right?
And just
I mean, typically it's going to be, if you're talking, well, it really depends on what you're talking about, what kind of system. I mean, if it's like a machine-to-machine traffic, that's fine, as far as just web services, or if it's from an end user, it could be that incoming servlet, and then it may hit 10 different servers on the back end, and when it comes back out, that's when it stops the stopwatch and says, okay, it took this long.
And it's a third question. I got you. How do you install the agent in the client devices in the browser? Do you have some JavaScript that you add to our application?
Yeah, so the end user experience piece is just that it's a small piece of JavaScript that goes into the head of the HTML response page back to the end user.
And for the same origin policy, you surely will send everything to our server, or how do you deal with that? How do you collect that information?
I'm sorry?
He's asking about the beacons.
For example,
How do beacons get home?
if I have a server, right? I have a client. Generally, I want to allow my client to send in data to another domain. Same origin policy in the browser, right?
Yeah.
Now that means that you will install a service in my application server that collects this client information.
Yeah, so even the way it works for internet customers, typically, is when we talk about the way that works, so you've got the JavaScript that's in the page, right? It goes down to the browser, we get the data, we send it back to our EUM cloud, right?
No,
so
you cannot send my data.
yeah, so there's 2 different ways this can work. It's sort of like on-prem versus in the cloud. We have 2 different ways that we can do this. We can have it for your situation. We can host this EUM cloud on-premise next to the controller, right?
And make them see the share the same domain so that the JavaScript can be able to send out that data.
You basically create a URL, and at the end, the JavaScript will package up into a small package of results and ship it off to that URL.
So the client on the browser is feeding data back to the controller?
So that's kind of. So this is, I know what your question is. It's around security. How is it getting, if it's on-premise, how are you pushing data to an on-premise server without a domain name? There's a separate component that's called the collector, the data collector, that sits out, that faces the internet, right?
On my server.
Yes, on your server. That's a data collector. It faces the internet, and that can pull data in from your clients. But that's separate, though, from the regular controller. After it pulls the data in, it feeds to the controller internally, and that's a separate port that it does go.
Yeah,
So there's only one port facing outward, and it's the collector.
Right. The collector would sit in the DMZ, and then it would communicate with the controller.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So you can separate these components.
So your client has to have connectivity to that.
To that.
To the collector,
Right.
yeah.
So if you're Amazon,
Yes.
So today, if you're talking about not that really secure kind of situation, we have our EUM cloud that's in Amazon, essentially, which is elastically expandable, right? So that's where when all the end user clients are out there using your application, it's going to send those beacons back to our cloud, right? And then it goes from there to maybe our SaaS controller, maybe your internal on-prem controller. Or you can have that cloud on-premise as well.
What does JP Morgan do actually?
Everything
on-prem.
on-prem. Everything on-prem.
It'll be the MU inside of the DMZ.
Okay.
Pretty much guaranteed anybody that's financial is going to do that.
Okay.
So yeah, we're very used to working in both those scenarios.
So are you also trying to diagnose problems with JavaScript code too?
Yeah,
Yes.
we'll find those as well.
It's literally,
Yeah.
it's one line of code that gets added plus a package that you have installed inside your client application. It's just the JavaScript library. So you add one line to the header of your JavaScript and then it takes care of the rest of it. So you're not putting in code bits all over the place. It's one.
So you put it in like a script file?
Yeah.
Okay.
You put it in the very first line of the script header.
Actually, we'll auto-inject for
Yeah,
some platforms like Tomcat. The
Okay.
agent will auto-inject, you have to do no code modification.
Oh,
But if you want to own the injection yourself, you can add it into the header.
Oh yeah, we can also do automatic injection now for just at the IAS tier, Apache and Nginx, using like mod rewrites on the Apache or Nginx side. Right, so actually does the same kind of thing in IAS.
How big is your team in matter of being active globally, or is just in the US, or is
Our company?
German team.
you have a
Oh yeah, we have a full German team. Yeah, they kick ass. We've got about, I think we just went over 600 people just recently for the company.
Where's the headquarters?
San Francisco. Yeah, out there. But yeah, there's you can sit here and demo this thing for days. I mean, there's so many little pieces. So, and typically too, as far as what people ask about is, how do you get up and going with it, get it, going. We've got a whole group that coming from our CEO, right? One of his biggest things is making customers happy, right? The product is typically on a 3-year subscription basis. So if we don't have happy customers that are really using the product, adopting the product, they're not going to renew, right? So I think we've got like a 95, 98% renewal rate at this point. So that's one of his biggest things is we've got a whole customer satisfaction team just to make sure that our customers are happy with it.
So will you sit with the customer and tailor the UI, this view that you're showing us here to their needs?
We can, absolutely. And then there's different pieces to that as far as what do you want to call the pages? What do you want to call your BTs? What does it look like architecturally? Some of the biggest customers we've got our architects who have been like the APM guys that roll out. One of the guys did it for Chris St. Pierre for Fifth Third Bank and PNC Bank. He was their APM guy that would go around to all their different groups and say, here's what we're doing, guys. Here's what we need to roll it out. Who we're going to have for your group that is, the contact and all these things. We just set up a plan like that. FedEx, they just went from a very old solution, CA Wiley. We're doing this a lot now. 20,000 JVMs that we're going to be installing for them. And there's a lot of coordination that goes along with that. So we have teams that actually work in these large environments all the way down to, doing, online training, a lot of stuff focused around that as well for, we've got customers that, have 5 JVMs and all the way up to 20, 30,000.
Can I ask the cost of the JVM license?
Yeah.
$3,000 an agent, and then from 1 to 10, and then you start getting into volume discounts, things like that.
So that's for a year?
With full support. Another thing I want to mention when we're talking about customer satisfaction, those types of things, was Zendesk rated they rate 15,000 support teams, and we were in the top 1% last year.
That's a good point. Yeah.
Good testament. It's the best support team I've ever worked with, and these guys.
Well, I think that's one of the things you look at too.
Yeah.
When you're looking at any solution is what do the analysts say? What do your customers say about your product? So Gartner, everybody looks at the Magic Quadrant for whatever type of software you're in, whatever product it might be. The first year we had that we're eligible, we were like a cool vendor with Gartner. And then the first time we were eligible to get in, we were actually in the upper right-hand quadrant. And for the last 2 years, we've been in the very top of that quadrant as the leaders. So that's pretty cool. So the analysts say technically we're the strongest product out there. And then you look at what the customers say, along with the support that you get, right? What is the net promoter score, which is essentially, would you suggest this product service to your friends or colleagues and whatnot? And it's crazy as far as we're up there, above what people would say about their iPhone and Apple.
iPhones are in the mid-70s. I think we got rated
84 now. Yeah.
Yes, but in terms of environment, a full public financial institute for critical application, you look at $100,000. That's a lot of money.
Well,
When you talk about 3,000 for a single.
But they're a financial institution, so the risk of anything lost.
It's not that the problem. That's why they rather do nothing than having a clean monitoring attendant. Why do we work with open source and professional open source? Why do we drop our web logic and so on? It was because they would have better services with JBoss and some flat licensing that were very helpful compared to the BA class that didn't work anyway. So, one thing that really locked out door to big companies are cost. When they taste the blood, they pay a lot of money. But starting, they need some low entry barrier to discover the tool and know how important it is for them.
I'd say this, we're an open source shop. We're a big Red Hat partner. A lot of our customers are the same way. They want to innovate and they want the low cost. They want the innovation of the open source. This product and the value that it brings, not only from the technical side of things, but from a business perspective, one outage away from a financial institution, this would pay for itself. So a lot of these big customers are biting off on it. They see the value of it.
But how do you stop? Like I said,
FedEx didn't get done overnight.
So one of the
started using JBoss without even paying a penny. And some of them sent hundreds of thousands of dollars to Red Hat today because they see the what they have.
So I think there's a stat here that we really go with the land and expand model. You don't have to boil the whole ocean. Most of our customers will start with an app, 2 apps, 3 apps, and then from there, I think that's when you really, what you're talking about, you start getting your buy-in, and from there, I think in the first 18 months, our enterprise customers go back and invest more in AppDynamics. And on the support side, support side of the product, and I think the number is 2.75 from what they spent initially in the first 18 months, because it spreads like wildfire. When you were talking earlier, I don't know what customer you're talking about, but they couldn't make that meeting because they're all sitting in a room. They're all sitting in a room. If they sat in the room for 1 hour, that was 80 of them. You said it was 1 hour?
8 hours.
8 hours. Oh yeah, so it's 640 hours. How much did they pay those guys to do that?
Exactly.
What could that have been reduced to? We talked on, lead time resolution, those types of things.
There's a huge ROI. One thing, a huge return on investment. That's number one. One of the things you asked though about what's a big reason for payment costs, right? I'll tell you this from experience. There are other APM solutions out there. They aren't as good. That's just my opinion. But more importantly than that, there is 0 APM solutions in the world, 0 besides AppDynamics right now that you can do C++ with. And I don't even mean that you have to do code base in C++. You can attach it to a Linux module, a Linux kernel module, and inject in a C++ that was made in the 80s.
I got you. I have a paper on Red Hat website that I wrote for Red Hat to sell Red Hat services to customers, right? Talking about the cost of programmers to show them why they should open source and so on. I know that approach of saying that calculate the cost of 80 people sitting in a room for an hour. But the problem is sometimes the entry barrier. I'm telling you, I'm a consultant. We have a service company. When we go into the company, we can tell them that you are having a lot of problems. Last November, I was in a company in Stuttgart, in Germany, trying to help them fix up a problem that you will solve with it right away. But where do you start? And when you come there are many people that don't even want to have it because they are fearing that it will display what they're doing. And when you start with the cost, they look at the price and they say, oh, too expensive. Why should we do that and so on? So where are the entry barriers? Can somebody call you to say, come and put up a concept in the company for 3 months I can better look at.
No, a
the
60-day trial type
solutions.
stuff.
Yeah.
I mean,
No,
the
we can do that,
POV, you
yeah.
guys want to talk about the
We'll do
POV
that.
process? Or?
And I would say if it's one of your customers, your financial institutions in Germany, get in touch with the team over there. They'll be more than happy to come out, show you the product, hook you up with like a 15-day trial, or actually let them install it with you, with your customer, and run it for a month. Show them what they find, right? And throughout that process, so what you're talking about too, as far as the ROIs and whatnot, we're very accustomed to working with customers and identifying all these things as far as people sitting in the room for long periods of time, the mean time to innocence, all the people trying to do that. What about those areas within servers that are barely utilized? We help customers take out tons of excessive equipment that's almost like why you have VMs today, but those kinds of things. There's a lot of different reasons to have it, and we have entire sessions that we sit down and work through those things. That the sales teams, we have business value consultants that actually just go through and understand in the business. Here's where you are today. Here's where you want to get to. Here's what an outage costs. Here's what a brownout when things are slow. And that's one of the biggest things too. Is it's easy to tell when something's gone down, right? It's not working. It's easy to say when it's green. What about when it's yellow? It just stays there. What is that costing? I think who was it? Was it Google actually did something where probably heard that.
It was Google and Microsoft. They did a study where they intentionally injected slowness into
The latency.
their apps to study the user behavior, and they found that it's actually damaged the relationships permanently.
With
People would
those
stop
customers.
using that service.
And it cost them X amount of dollars in just ad revenue. So you look at that as far as an e-commerce site, how long does it cost the bank, those financial institutions, for slow trades, right? So that's one of the biggest things with JP Morgan. When we first went in there, within the first 2 weeks, they had 3 of the biggest competitors. Within 2 weeks, we actually took the trading latency down by 60% of the time. And they could actually quantify that in a dollar amount. Right? So when you look at that, that saved them millions of dollars a year just in one find. And we'll typically find things, during a proof of concept, right? So when you look at those kinds of things, it no longer becomes a huge cost barrier. But that's, sit down with those guys and let them work with you on it. Right?
So I have a question. Earlier you showed that you could see certain types of browsers calling into the system. Can it tell you who is authenticating?
You can see from the user data, you can see what information was passed, and that'll be tracked in a transaction. But from what I've seen before, you can't track a user transaction to a user name. It just was this user data submitted to a web transaction. I can see someone logged in with this username and password during this particular.
But you don't know who, right?
You don't know if that person's who they say they are. All you know is it's this username and this password was typed in. What you should potentially. Yeah, you don't see the password. That's
Yeah.
Okay.
So
Well, the reason I'm asking is my boss is asking me, who is calling these web services? And how many times is this guy calling it? Because if they're calling it a lot, we want to throttle them.
Let me ask you something. You're a JBoss user?
We use Glassfish.
You're a Glassfish user? I'll take my card after this. We'll have a talk because I have another product that I can talk to you about that I've built internally that we're going to start selling in June. Okay. That's in regards to security, in regards to web services and authorization calls and whatnot. So.
Well, with that though, yes, we can, especially with our newest offering that's just coming out or just gone GA. It's our transaction analytics product. So this will actually do more or less what you're talking about. I was talking about what lives in the code and what you can pull out of the method parameter, right? So if you have something that is either or even on the website of the traffic, a session identifier, JSession ID, something like that, and you want to put those together and say, hey, that's this user or whatever it may be. There are things that we can do there. But what's coming up, what we're doing is real sessionization on the EUM side. So being able to say, here's somebody that came in, and here they hit this page, this page, this page, this page, and then here's where it bombed out, and they didn't go any further. Or maybe they had problems here, it got really slow, and then we did this and this. Or if it's like an external website and you have somebody that you're going out to 10 different ad sites or third parties, we can actually see for this JPEG or whatever, maybe this piece of JavaScript that's being executed by a third party, that's where it was slow. Or what if it's an Akamai or somebody like that serving up content on your behalf, and that's slow. You need some way to actually monitor that and be able to have something to go back to that third party, right? Or if we have a lot of e-commerce sites or anything that's a third party call that goes out to maybe a bank, to PayPal, to Amex, Visa. We had the CIO of Williams Sonoma come and talk to us at one of our kickoffs 2 years ago, and he said that one of the biggest reasons that he loves what we do and why he came out was the first big thing that they had with that was they would always have a problem where one of their payers, a Visa, they would suspect that that's where the slowness was coming from, but they could never prove it. So he'd always call up and talk to their CIO and say, hey, do you guys change anything? We think it's on your side, but they could never tell. Got our product in, and they could see that normally it takes 600 milliseconds for it to come back. In this given time, it was taking 6 seconds. Right? So he calls in, talks to the CIO. Oh, we didn't do anything. He goes, well, that's funny because I just talked to one of your support guys, said you guys rolled out a new version of your app this morning, and just by chance, that's where we see this huge spike. He sent it over to him, and he's like, we'll fix it. Next time he calls, what do you think happened? He goes, yeah, I know you've got the data to support what you're asking.
Right, okay.
Right? So any kind of third-party type calls, it's awesome. But this thing is going to be really cool as far as the analytics. What happens when you start taking out data from the browser, from the end user, from a web server, from an app server, from C++, from log files, and you can start putting it together and start asking all these business questions about it.
Is that built on Elasticsearch, that new part? Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, our new platform that's coming out to house all of this data. So instead of just getting that, the stuff that's slow, this is going to be getting all of the data for anything that you're asking for. You look at an e-commerce site. So this is looking at a specific application, e-commerce, the checkout transaction, and where my user experience is an error. Now show me, which products, top 10 product categories, which items that were sold, what is the total revenue, what's the revenue over time, so you can actually see what is the product. When you have errors that are going like this, what's your revenue, do that, something like that. Or what happens in a trading application or whatever it might be. Yeah.
Going back to data protection and security, is there any sort of access control that can define what user in the organization is allowed to see what data here?
Absolutely. Yeah, so within here, you've got your administration, you have your users, groups, and roles. Typically, big organizations will use LDAP, and actually your LDAP groups will kind of convert to our roles in terms of that. You can, there's a number of kind of default roles as far as account owners, the admin, custom dashboard viewer, read-only, but you can get very, very specific on what people can see and do within the product. And that's been good for, I guess one of the things too, when you start talking about that is looking at, let me just show you real quick. A lot of times get these questions when you have somebody that hasn't necessarily been around our product a lot or that kind of thing, but when you look here, you've got Barclays, NASDAQ, RBC, Royal Nordic Bank. All these are some of the financial institutions that trust what we're doing, and that's just one of those things that helps a lot of times. You look at who we're working with; they've all been through the same ringer that I'm sure your financial group would put us through too. But now we're
and those are the names we can put up there.
Yeah, these are, there's a lot of things. There's a I don't think it's on there. That you probably can't. There's a big company in California. It's like a big red fruit. That's how big around. That doesn't let you use their name a whole lot.
I'll just say there's certain spy agencies that are using us now, and they use it. Trust me, it's safe enough.
Right. So, yeah, I mean, this is kind of just some of the names that we have up there. But, what other questions do you guys have?
Do you have like a mobile view into the controller?
Yeah, so we have an iOS app. Yep. Yeah. And on the mobile side, this is part of the end user piece. What's kind of interesting about this is when you're looking at crashes on your mobile apps, right? Being able to see unique crashes, how many users are affected, which versions of your app had issues, right? And then being able to see even custom data about that, creating, hey, you know what, we've got all this information, but how long does it take until the page loads on my mobile device?
Well, I was referring to not the app
Can you
running.
view your
Right.
Yeah.
console. Yeah.
Right. Okay.
Yeah, there's an iOS app for that. Android's coming out in a little bit.
Yeah, the CEO has an Android, so that'll be up to this.
Yeah,
I see.
which is good because,
So do I.
yeah.
Huh?
All right, cool.
You're in the
I was
code.
like in the
You're in the
hurry.
Well, thanks a lot, Mike. Thanks
Yeah,
for
yeah,
having you guys. And thanks for everyone for coming. If you guys need any more info, let us know.
Yeah, cool, thanks, guys.
Appreciate it.
Guys, if you didn't sign in, please